Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, I could never hope to do it, would never want to do it without the $1 million man himself, legendary Hall of Famer Ted DiBiase. What's going on, brother?
Man, it's another day and another, well, maybe I should say, yeah, everybody goes another day, another dollar, right? Another day, another million. No. Seriously, I'm looking forward to Christmas. It's, I have 4 grandchildren that fortunately I can see almost every day if I wanted to. I mean, but that's what Christmas is all about. That, and I'm looking forward to, each of those families. Teddy and his wife will do their thing, and usually, and it's because it's kind of like everybody goes, why do you live in Mississippi? I said, my wife's family was from Mississippi. Mm-hmm. I moved there for my wife. That's back when I was on the road all the time. But you don't know how many guys I've talked to that live where they live for the same reason. Anyway.
Absolutely. Man, it's so cool that you've got family so close by, though. Man, what a great benefit. And gosh, a bunch of grandkids running around Christmas time. It really is the most wonderful time of the year, isn't it?
Yeah. We're ready. We're ready to rock and roll.
How exciting. Well, I am really ready to rock and roll on this episode because I just told you here before we hit record, this episode, some really significant stuff during this period. 2 of the most controversial things to ever happen in professional wrestling happened right at this time that we're going to be covering today. It's late 1997. Of course, fans are going to know that I'm talking about the Montreal Screwjob in the WWF. And then on the WCW side, the very, very controversial ending of Starcade 1997. I've got it all in the notes here, and we are going to dive in. So, Ted, if you're ready, we can get moving.
Let's go for it.
So the biggest story of the year is the focus coming out of Halloween Havoc 1997. Definitely something I'd love to get your take on here. Meltzer reported in the 11/10 Observer that Bret Hart had given his notice to the WWF and was officially bound for WCW. So I think it's worth noting that Bret has said that Vince actually asked him to agree to dissolve the contract that they had agreed upon only about a year after, which is reportedly, Ted, this contract that Vince offered to Bret in 1996 is a 20-year contract worth $1 million per year guaranteed. So just as a reminder for listeners, when Ted was working in the WWF, the only guarantee with the company was you got to work 10 dates at $150 per date. That's it. So $1,500 was your guarantee. Now, of course, all of these wrestlers, Ted and Jake and all the guys who signed these contracts, they all made more on the house shows. But Vince was only obligated to pay them $1,500 total dollars over the course of their contract. So pretty crazy how quickly the business changed in such a short period of time, isn't it, Ted?
Yes, and I guess the other question that I would even have now was, how did Bret Hart get that kind of a contract?
Well, the reason really kind of boils down to what was happening with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. They came over to WCW in 1996 on, I believe, they got guaranteed money from Turner, which, guaranteed money in the WWF at the time was not a thing. Hall and Nash signed contracts for $750,000 a year when they jumped over to Turner. So now all of the talent who they're in the ear of that over in the WWF are like, how much money are you making over there? And it's guaranteed, and you work less dates. And so, like, the expectation is now changed among talent. So I think Vince knew that, so he offered Bret this massive contract to get him from jumping over.
Makes sense.
A crazy amount of money, though, isn't it?
Did he, did he stay?
So Bret Hart, Vince actually came to Bret in 1997 here at this point, and he said, "Bret, we cannot afford to pay you this contract. I know that we agreed on it, and we'd like to let you out of the contract and get you to explore options with WCW because the year prior, before Bret signed this contract with Vince, apparently Eric Bischoff had offered him a $2.8 million per year contract to come over to WCW. Bret turned it down because he loved the WWF and wanted to stay there. And Vince made him this offer of $1 million a year for 20 years. So Bret stayed. And then a year later, Vince is like, hey, so sorry, we can't pay you. Go ahead and see if you can get that money back from Eric Bischoff.
Yeah. Wow.
So, man, just crazy things happening. But I mean, huge news here. Bret Hart, he's making the jump to WCW. That could never be considered a bad thing. The roster's already jam packed with amazing talent. Ted, what were your thoughts on adding Bret Hart to the roster in WCW?
Well, I mean, Bret Hart and I are good friends. I mean, my father wrestled for Stu Hart, way back when, and so again, the one thing that Bret and I both had in common is that we came from wrestling families,
Mm-hmm.
and which is kind of like some people did it just for the money, but I did, and of course I'm going to do it for the money, but the bottom line is, it was just, it was a part of my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's something that Bret and I had in common. Now I look back at that and go, I don't know, man. Maybe I should have stayed a little longer, because by the time when all this time we're talking about right now, I wasn't an active wrestler. I was a manager.
Right. And this crazy money's starting to get made.
Yeah, and so basically, I got one of those contracts too.
You did. I believe that you were making a reported, it started at $250,000 per year, your first year, and then it increased year by year for, I believe it was 3 years, something like
Yeah,
that. So,
yeah.
yeah, you made some good money yourself in WCW. But to your point, Ted, if you had remained an active wrestler, who knows
Oh,
how much you could have
yeah, that
leveraged.
money would have been way higher.
Right.
That's real good money for a manager.
Believe it or not, we actually do return to that subject here shortly in the notes, the idea of the notion of you coming back as a wrestler. So that's coming up. Before we get there, the next edition of The Observer comes out after all hell breaks loose in Montreal in one of the most infamous happenings in wrestling history. Ted, I know that you're familiar with the Montreal Screwjob, and we've discussed it a little bit here on the show before, but certainly worth revisiting in more depth here as we're covering this period. Did you ever see the Wrestling with Shadows documentary? Or how much about the circumstances surrounding this event are you familiar with?
I mean, I remember it, but I need you to help me remember most of it. So
Sure.
yeah, so
So, Ted, before I get into all the details from the Montreal Screwjob, from an outsider's perspective, who do you feel was in the wrong in this circumstance? Vince asking Bret to drop the belt in his home country despite Bret's protests, or Bret for not willingly doing the job on his way out the door?
uh, I mean, if he's leaving the territory,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, I mean, I would say, Bret, it's wrestling is show business. You're leaving the territory. No, you're not really the champion. It's a work, and so I would put it on Bret.
Mm-hmm. Now, I had a feeling you were going to say that, and that's why I've kind of included a lot of what was going on behind the scenes so that I can kind of get your take on it after you hear about all this. I know you're a pro's pro, and you were always willing to just run whatever play the promoter wanted you to, and that's the right thing to do in business. I do think that an argument could be made, though, that what was happening to Bret Hart behind the scenes kind of creates extenuating circumstances. So
Okay.
let me kind of run this down a little bit.
Okay.
So just to paint the full picture, WrestleMania 12, which is 1996, a year prior to this, Bret Hart willingly does the job for Shawn Michaels in the Iron Man match there, with the expectation that Shawn is going to return him the favor at the following Mania. Shawn's run as champion does not go well from a ratings perspective, and they wind up putting the belt on Sid and then switching it back to Shawn. Shawn allegedly suffers a knee injury, and that's that infamous promo where he loses his smile and he has to leave the promotion for a while, which just happens to happen right before WrestleMania 13 when he was expected to drop the belt back to Bret Hart. So a lot of people say that Shawn was full of shit and he did not want to drop the belt to Bret, which is why right after Mania, Shawn is going to return to action in May. And so as a result of this, the tension between Shawn and Bret starts to really build to an all-time high. Now, on top of this, Ted, according to WWE diva Sunny, if you remember her, and numerous other sources, Shawn had been having an affair with Sunny during this period of time, and apparently thought that Bret Hart had been doing the same thing with Sunny. And this leads to Shawn making a comment on TV about Bret Hart having sunny days. So Shawn is giving a promo on TV, and he says in the middle of it that Bret's been having sunny days recently. Apparently, Bret Hart's wife is watching the program at this time, and now Bret has to have a serious conversation with his wife when he gets home as a result of Shawn Michaels cutting this promo. In June 1997, Bret and Shawn get into a huge legitimate backstage fist fight. Bret Hart gets the better of it and pulls out a big chunk of Shawn Michaels' hair. Now, according to Bret, he attempts to bury the hatchet with Shawn and tells him that he respects him and he would be willing to drop the belt to him if he needed to. And Shawn responds to this with something to the effect of, "That's nice, but I would not do the same for you." So that's all stuff that really happened behind the scenes during this period of time and all the lead up to the Montreal Screwjob. Have you ever heard any of that before, Ted?
Nope.
So now that I've painted this picture,
And you know, and I because there's a lot of times since we've been, you know, and since you dug up all this information and stuff about what was going on at the time, you know, I guess it was just I pretty much stuck to myself. You know what I'm saying? I didn't, I didn't get involved in any, anybody else's business or what they were doing, and then maybe that's why a lot of this stuff is just it's like new information to me. I mean, I knew that Shawn and Bret, were back and forth. I know. I mean, shit happens, but if you're a man, you work it out. Bottom line is, when the company asks you, to do the job, you do the job. You are not in a position to say no.
Man, it's interesting to hear your take on it because, like, from an outsider's perspective, I agree with you where it's like, hey, Bret, sorry, it sucks, but you need to drop the belt. Then, you hear about all the stuff that was happening and like personal comments about Bret possibly having an affair on TV, and then Bret's got to go home and talk to his wife about it. It would be tough. Like, if you hate this guy's guts and you've got to put him over on your way out the door, it'd be like, I hate this guy. I don't want to do him any favors on my way out,
Now, the other thing I would say is it's the way if Bret's getting beat, how does he get beat?
Yes.
Does he get beat just, like 1, 2, 3, and it's, I think if I was ever asked to drop a belt, and if what the promoters tell me is kind of like doesn't seem to make sense at all, or if I was asked to do it in such a way that it would bury me, you know what I'm saying? Then that's when I say, stick it up your ass, but that never happened to me. I was never in a position. I don't think I was ever unjustly asked to do a job.
That's the other half of it, and I think you raise a point that a lot of people never really consider when it comes to this match, is, like, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. Like, "Okay, Brett, you can lose, but how about they screw you in some way where it's very obvious that you're about to win, and then, Sean, cheats and pulls out the victory." Like, there's a lot of ways to do this where Brett doesn't necessarily have to have egg on his face going out the door either, right?
Yeah, right. Well, that put Vince in a tough spot too, didn't it?
Yeah, it's, a lot of people kind of paint Brett as a victim here, and ultimately, it's not a great way to finish your time with a company that you've given so much with. However, Brett really did put the company in an awkward position, saying, "Hey, I know that you, as my bosses, are asking me to do this. I'm telling you that I'm not doing it the way that you want me to." And so Vince is like, "Hey, look, if I let one of the boys push me around like this, what
Yeah,
does that mean for the future of this company?"
exactly. And so, yeah, it's business is business, and regardless of what else you have going on, and even if I don't think I don't think there's anybody I ever put over that I absolutely hated.
Mhm.
you know, um, because I pretty much got along with everybody.
Well, another subject that comes up as a result of this is guaranteed contracts. So Eric Bischoff is doing an interview following the Montreal Screwjob, and he was asked about the idea of allowing wrestlers to have creative control. Or wait, yeah, not guaranteed contracts, creative control. You and I have talked about creative control in the past on the show and how damaging it can be. Bischoff makes an argument in the other direction that I'd love to hear your take on. So here's what Bischoff said during this interview that he was doing at the time. Given the circumstances that we unfortunately all witnessed, or at least have knowledge of, with regards to the Bret Hart situation, it's clear to see why wrestlers would want creative control. If you can't trust the people you work with and for, it's very difficult to put your career in the hands of people who, if given half a chance, would attempt to ruin your career.
Mm.
Actors have the opportunity to look at a script before they accept a role and then decide whether they want to risk their career with a specific script or director. Wrestling isn't like that, as we all know. There's a big difference. I think violation of trust is one of the things that has created the kind of atmosphere that I have heard exists in the WWF locker room.
Mm.
So there you go, Ted. That's Eric Bischoff saying, "Hey, this is why creative control exists in WCW." How do you respond to that notion?
No, so yeah, no creative control. That's bullshit. You're there. You're working for a company, and of course, you have to have you have to trust that the company is going to you know treat you decently.
The office should always have creative control, but you as one of the boys, you can take a look at it and say like, "Hey, I see what you're saying here, and I'll do the job, but like, why don't we figure out the right way to do it instead of having me just get beat as the baby face, Like, why don't we do this? Like, in other words, just open up the lines of communication more among the boys in the office so that
Yeah,
you guys can kind of come to an agreement when it comes to it. But putting creative control in the hands of the boys, I don't know, man.
no, never do that. Shoot, never. There's some guys that never want to get beat.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Another debut at this time is Rick Rude. This one is really pretty wild, Ted, that Rick Rude is in WCW at this time, and here's why. He actually appeared on both Raw and Nitro on the same night. Raw was pre-taped, and Rude appeared with a beard as a member of DX. Then he quit the company after what happened to Bret Hart in the Montreal Screwjob. He wasn't under contract. I think he was doing an appearance by appearance agreement. And so he just quit the company after the Montreal Screwjob, comes to WCW and shows up on Nitro. So as Raw is airing on USA, Rick Rude is there. And then on the other channel, TNT, Rick Rude is there too. But instead of having a beard, now he's got a mustache that he shaved it into. So pretty crazy stuff, isn't it? Rick Rude is appearing on both programs on the same night.
Oh yeah, and I didn't know that happened either.
Well, Bischoff mentioned this on his podcast that during this period, Rick Rude came to him and asked him to pay back the Lloyd's of London insurance settlement that Rude had received so that Rude could step back into the ring. Apparently, Rude's career-ending injury wasn't plaguing him like it had been previously, and he felt like he was ready for an in-ring return. Bischoff refused to pay back the Lloyd's of London settlement, which came in at over like $400,000 or something like that. And so Rick Rude's ring return never came to fruition.
Yeah.
So Ted, I say all that to say we're going to return to something that you had mentioned earlier. Earlier in this podcast, you had said, well, maybe I should have hung around a little bit longer as a wrestler because all this crazy money and these huge contracts started happening here in like the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
Well, the 1229 edition of The Observer has this to say. Ted DiBiase is actually thinking seriously of making a comeback. DiBiase, who turns 44 next month, has been out of action a few years since suffering a serious neck injury while wrestling in Japan. He collected on a Lloyd's of London insurance policy, signing off that he would never be able to wrestle again. For him to wrestle, he'd have to pay Lloyd's a figure said to be around $462,000, and he's apparently strongly considering it. During his career, DiBiase was one of the best workers of his era. So, Ted, that's a pretty big report there from Meltzer in The Observer. How do you respond to that?
Well, Meltzer likes to make things sound great, but it was kind of like, it was what it was. It's like I never seriously considered. I mean, for me to actually come out of retirement, they would have had to pay that back, and if I'm going to do that, then if you really want me to wrestle that bad, then you won't mind, picking up the tab, paying back the insurance company and what have you. But the more I thought about it, it goes back to the thing with my dad. It's like 45 years old and he's gone.
Well, between Halloween Havoc and Starcade, we have the World War III pay-per-view. Ted, the big match there, if you recall, is a 3-ring, 60-man battle royal. So 3 rings all lined up in the middle of the arena, and then they will do a 60-man battle royal. Ted, what do you think about the concept of packing 60 dudes into 3 rings in front of an audience?
I would never attack that. 60 wrestlers? Are you kidding me?
Insane.
Insane. And then okay, how do you decide who's going out when and all that? Yeah, I mean, I guess they did, but
They did, and it's still just crazy though. And I think of it, you were a color commentator at one point in your career. Can you imagine trying to call that action? 60 guys in 3 rings?
No,
impossible.
No,
Impossible.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let's take a quick minute to talk about our great sponsor, Blue Chew. Let me tell you guys, I get asked about Blue Chew all the time, and the question is pretty much always the same. Does it actually work? Well, look, if you're asking that question, it's time for you to find out for yourself if Blue Chew is working. They put their money where their mouth is, pal, because they're giving you a month for free. There is nothing worse than when you get into the bedroom, you're ready to go, your partner's ready to go, but you look down and your little pal down there is just staring at the carpet. Let's get that guy back to work with Blue Chew. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in chewable form. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew tablets are made right here in the good old US of A and prepared and shipped direct to your door. You want to know the best part? It's done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no weird, awkward, uncomfortable conversations anymore, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready when that opportunity arises. We have all heard the saying, it's important to have confidence. People like confidence. Women like confidence. And if you're going into the bedroom without confidence, you are not going to perform well. It's not going to be a fun experience. Why not give yourself an opportunity to leave a lasting impression on your partner? Who knows? It might just be the best sex of your life that you've been missing out on. Come on, time to take advantage. Try it for a month for free and see for yourself. I think that you're going to love it. And I think more importantly, your partner's going to love it. Blue Chew has told me this themselves. They want men rock hard. They've been saying that. That's their mission. They will not stop until every man is bricked up like a brick house, till every tent is pitched, till every rod is raised. It's time to discover your options at BlueChew.com. We've got a special deal for our audience. Try Blue Chew free. Just pay $5 shipping at checkout when you visit BlueChew.com. That's BlueChew.com to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring Everybody's Got a Pot. All right, let's get to Starcade 1997. It's the biggest show in the history of the company ever in WCW. The buildup for this is incredible. Unfortunately, a few things do not go as planned, and a lot of fans point to this show as the beginning of the downfall of WCW. First, let's talk about your involvement here. Your Steiner brothers teamed up with Ray Traylor in a losing effort against Randy Savage, Scott Norton, and Vincent. Not much to tell about this match, to be honest. Pretty basic match, but
Yeah.
it's interesting that Ray Traylor is getting thrown into the mix here with you and the Steiners. What did you think about adding a talent like Ray to the Steiner brothers?
Uh,
Presentation.
well, I don't think it was bad. I mean, he's a good guy, and a decent worker. I mean, he was pretty good on the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. He's a good talent, but I wouldn't say that he would be your main event guy all the time.
Right. Right.
So
I think he fit well in the role of the big boss man against Hulk Hogan when he was a younger man in the WWF. But yeah, this stage of his career, I don't know, he's an excellent mid card wrestler.
yeah,
The show is snakebit from the start in many ways. Kevin Nash and Conan both had to miss their scheduled appearances at Starcade due to health and personal issues. Where it starts getting weird is Eric Bischoff has a match at this event. Again, this is the biggest show in the history of WCW, arguably maybe one of the biggest shows in the history of wrestling up to this point with the buildup that they had. And Eric Bischoff is on it. He's wrestling Larry Zbyszko. And you can imagine how poorly the match went. On top of the fact that Bischoff isn't a wrestler, he legitimately hurt his knee while he was training for this match, which hampered everything even more. So, I don't know, Eric Bischoff stepping out from behind the announcer's desk to wrestle. I don't know, man.
no.
Guys, if you aren't watching on YouTube right now, you're missing out.
No.
The face that Ted is making is something else.
No.
Bret Hart is a special referee for this match between Bischoff and Zbyszko and was apparently unable to compete because he had badly injured his hand when he shoot punched Vince McMahon in the face after the incident in Montreal. Ted, were you aware of the fact that Bret had punched Vince McMahon in the face after the Montreal Screwjob?
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I know that Nails had put his hands on Vince before, but wild to think that one of the boys would put their hands on Vince, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, this is the most
Way to
powerful
be-
man ever
That's
in the wrestling.
your way to be shown the door. See ya. Well, of course, I guess if you're gonna hit the boss, you plan on leaving anyway.
Yeah, that was Brett's finale there in the WWF. Punch out the chairman.
Hmm.
All right, well, let's get to the real big controversy of the night. This is what fans always talk about and point to when they talk about the downfall of WCW. So I'll lay the whole thing out for you real quick, and then we'll wrap this podcast up. After 16 months out of action and one of the most legendary match buildups of all time, Sting is finally back in action facing Hulk Hogan at Starrcade. This is the match that fans have been waiting for more than a year to see, and it's pretty much expected that Sting is going to end Hogan's reign of terror as the champion for the NWO. The heel champion finally gets his comeuppance. This is the moment. Things do not go well. Bischoff claims that he made the call to change the finish from being a clean victory because Sting's heart just wasn't in it. Bischoff said that Sting was not tanned when he showed up at the building and was apparently having some issues outside of the ring in his personal life, which Sting himself has corroborated that during this period of time, he was having some difficulty. I can't recall if it's with his marriage or what was going on with him, but I know that he was having a hard time outside the ring. The finish is set as Hogan is going to pin Sting and get a fast 3 count from the heel referee, Nick Patrick, which is going to screw Sting out of the title. But what's going to happen is they're going to play off the Montreal thing, and Bret Hart's going to run out to the ring and argue that nobody should be screwed the way that he had been. So the match would restart, and then Sting would get his victory. So that's the plan. Instead, what happens is that Nick Patrick does a normal 3 count. So Sting gets pinned by Hulk Hogan normally. It's just a regular slow 3 count.
Yeah.
And then Bret Hart runs out anyways because that's what was scheduled to happen.
Yeah.
Bret says, "You screwed Sting," where all the fans just watch like, that was a clean victory. against the returning Sting. So a lot of folks say that Hulk Hogan did this on purpose. They say that he intentionally asked Nick Patrick to do the normal speed 3 count so that he didn't have to take a clean loss in the eyes of fans on the pay-per-view. 16-month build-up, Ted, is essentially blown in one match. So all of this build-up, one of the greatest stories ever told in wrestling, completely blown. And the Sting versus the NWO angle is just never quite the same. I know that you probably weren't there when the match was getting laid out, Ted, and I know that you're keeping to yourself. But what do you think about all this crazy shit?
Oh, brother, it's kind of like I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, who's really running the show?
Makes you wonder.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It was kind of like what's that old saying? Too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everybody, it's like that whole creative control thing. It's kind of like how how is anybody? The whole difference is, when you go to the WWE, there's one boss. It's Vince. And everybody on the card is going to do whatever Vince wants them to do. And it's kind of like, if you don't like it, well, and then when Vince tells that, he says, if you don't like something, it's okay. But here's the thing. He says, if you come to me and you tell me you don't like something, don't just tell me you don't like it. Tell me what we can do different to make it work. In other words, don't come empty-handed and say, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that." Well, if you can't do that, then what can we do? And he says, and I'm happy to listen to whatever you got, But he says, but then again, at the end of the day, remember this: at the end of the day, I'm the one who's calling the shots, and you just have to, we all have to remember that. If we can agree to disagree, but you have to understand that at the end of the day, we're going to do what I want, and that's fair. So,
and I think that this issue at Starcade really does point to creative control being the problem. Like if something's set in cement, then Hogan and nobody can come up and say, "Hey, I'm changing that finish."
It was Hogan, it was Hall and Nash and Sting, and I was so glad that I wasn't a wrestler then.
I feel like if you had been and you had been given creative control, I'd be willing to bet that you, Ted DiBiase, you would never use it. You would just be like, yeah, whatever you want, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, last question. We're gonna wrap this one up. So Ted, like I said, the rumor suggests that Hulk Hogan is the one who altered the finish and convinced Nick Patrick to do a slow 3 count instead of the proposed fast 3 count. I don't know if I buy it, but I've never met Hulk Hogan. Ted, Hulk Hogan. Do you feel like that's something that he would do, just intentionally kind of screw one of the boys to make himself look better?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, a lot of people vilify Hogan and say like, "Oh, well, he was this politician behind the scenes and, only cared about himself." And it's like, well, wrestling is not a team sport. Yeah.
It's kind of like, now I would, again, protect myself, but I never screwed anybody. I never did a screw job on somebody, or surprise them with, something didn't go the way it was supposed to go. If it ever didn't go the way it was supposed to go, it was because whoever I was wrestling forgot. So anyway,
being a heel too is like it takes a lot of the pressure off of you, because like it doesn't really matter what the creative is when you're a heel, because ultimately as a heel you're supposed to end the night with egg on your face in some way, shape, or form, or end the angle with egg on your face. So it's like you don't really have to politic as a heel, because it's just like, yeah, whatever. It's I'm supposed to lose.
That was the deal, and it's like, and I never got beat in such a way that it made me like insignificant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was like, I could have lost, but or like, and again, if you're the heel, you're the guy that's supposed to end up with the egg on your face.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I always showed the people is that I could wrestle,
You damn sure did.
and that was the thing is like when I showed that I could wrestle, then because I could wrestle, then you know then I could I could back it up. Whatever I was saying, they knew I really had the ability to back it up. But what makes a heel is when they see that you can really wrestle, and yet you're willing to take the shortcuts.
Mm-hmm. Like when the going gets tough, then you start to pull out all the stops.
Yeah. So anyway.
Man, Ted, this was a really fun episode. Interesting to get your perspective on some of the most controversial stuff that ever happened in wrestling. Again, in like a 2-month period, all this crazy stuff is happening in professional wrestling. So always interesting to get your take on it. We'll come back to discuss WCW a couple more times before we wrap up your run there. And Ted, this is the final episode before the holidays, the big Christmas celebration.
Oh, wow.
So, man, I just want to say Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to all of our listeners. And hope you have a great holiday, my friend.
Hey, Merry Christmas to you and your family, and a very, very Merry Christmas to all the fans out there, and that, and a Happy New Year. Are we gonna have one between Christmas and New Year, or no?
Yes, sir. We'll have one more episode before the new year, provided that we aren't too busy. I'm not sure what next week looks like for you, but we'll sort it out here once we end the recording.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, that's gonna do it, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about late 1997.
Happy to do it, Marcus, and just don't drink too much of that eggnog, because sometimes they put stuff in it.
The stuff that's in it is the only reason I drink eggnog.
All right, brother. I love you, man.
I love you too, dude. And we'll catch you next time.
Well, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and of course, as long as you know me, and wherever you go, remember this: everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
We'll see you guys next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.
$1 million dream, tell them all good night. Everybody's got a pod, everybody's got a price. DBI.